Good evening, everyone. My name is Karen Holmes Ward. I see everybody's having a good time. Some people are still trying to stand up and keep chatting. But if you would like to find a seat, we have seats over here for you. And if not, we're going to ask you to keep the conversation to a whisper so that we can begin our program. My name is Karen Holmes Ward. I'm the Director of Public Affairs at WCVB TV Channel 5. And host of Channel 5 Cityline program and a proud honoree of the 2016 inaugural GK 100. Now, I'd like to thank all of you for coming to the celebration this evening. First, it's important to note that we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of Get Konnected, the premier inclusive business networking event. The wonderful thing about this event is that it brings together people of all cultural backgrounds across industries and sectors to network and make career and business connections. And secondly, we are celebrating the second edition of the GK 100, Greater Boston's most influential people of color, as well as the winners of GK 10, which represent 10 game-changing equity ideas that are contributing to making Boston more inclusive and equitable. Now, Get Konnected made history in 2016 with the inaugural GK 100, and tonight it is again making history because while there have been many lists created here in Boston, some focusing on a single culture or Boston's business and civic leadership, these lists often have little or no diversity on them. What a surprise! Well, the GK 100 is a game changer because it represents a comprehensive list of individuals from culturally diverse backgrounds who have distinguished themselves in their respective fields. Thanks to the GK 100, there are no more hidden figures in Boston. And those of us who know Colette are not surprised that the GK 100 list is very expansive and totally inclusive and diverse. It's a kaleidoscope of both immigrant and native-born Americans. Since Get Konnected's inaugural GK 100, let me tell you some of the positive things that have happened. No longer can Boston's old guard power elite say they don't know where to look. No more hidden figures. Now, two of the people on the list, Niraj Shah, co-founder of Wayfair, and Sheila Marcello, co-founder of Care.com, were invited to sit on the board of the Mass Competitive Partnership, which prior to 2017 had no diversity on its board. No more hidden figures. In October of 2016, Boston Magazine did its Boston Tech 30 feature, and 4 members of the GK 100 were featured: Wayne Chang of Crashalytics, Corey Thomas of Rapid7, Niraj Shah, and Sheila Marcello. No more hidden figures. The Boston Business Journal, WBUR, WGBH, and the Boston Globe have all literally been tapping this list to find new and different commentators and experts. And it is exactly what Get Konnected hoped would happen. No more hidden figures in Boston. That's right. Let's have a round of applause for that. Right, Colette? Now, we have some dignitaries that are here with us tonight. I'd like to acknowledge who they are. Boston City Councilor Ayanna Presley, State Representative Evandro Carvalho. I believe I saw the mayor, Dan Rivera, is here. And let me just say how delighted I am to be here and to join in this marvelous celebration. Now, just in case you're wondering if all the honorees are going to speak, don't despair. Is my friend Byron Barnett here? Byron? There he is. Byron, hey, okay. Byron Barnett, my colleague and good friend from WHDH-TV and a 2018 GK 100 honoree, is going to give brief remarks on behalf of all of the honorees tonight, a little later in the program. Now, I would like to ask that all the honorees of the 2016 GK 100, along with those who were part of the inaugural GK 100, please stand so we can recognize, thank, and applaud each of you for your contributions to the business, civic and social fabric of our community. Now, thank you very much for standing, everyone. Let me see a show of hands of all the people in the room who are, for the first time, at a Get Konnected event. Just for the first time. First time attendees, okay. Well, let me share with you what you've been missing, and you'll see why this will not be your last time. Can we ask our audio people to roll the tape?
I want to first say, I hope you each, before the evening, come up and get a chance to stand at this podium, even once they turn off the microphone, because the view from here is beautiful. And the amazing aggregation of talent here represented is a thing to behold.
As a Get Konnected veteran, I can vouch for over the years, this group has evolved and grown and become so much more powerful.
I want to thank the work that Colette does for bringing together people from all across the different fields and backgrounds that are here today. It's really what's changing the game. Once people get to know each other on a personal level, the barriers to partnerships and opportunities fall down.
When I went to it, I was just astounded by the diversity, by the positive energy, by the enthusiasm of everybody within the room, and led, of course, by Colette and her staff, who were just all over the place, making sure everybody met one another, making sure everybody felt welcome.
It provides an opportunity for diverse professionals in Boston to come together, network, socialize, and build bridges and relationships across different fields, different sectors, both business and nonprofit.
We recruit young professionals to Boston, and we really want to keep them here. And I had written something about, it says it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to build a diverse organization, and Colette has done it so well by helping EMC to maintain our population of diverse employees here in Boston.
People think of Boston as a small town, but the truth is, a lot of us spend our time in a certain industry or in a certain community, and we don't spend enough time making connections all the way across this Boston area. We're one of the world's great cities. There's a lot of amazing people here, and we all need to take the time to understand and appreciate everything that people do here, and Colette helps us do that, for which I'm thankful.
All right, wonderful. And of course, our mayor of the city of Boston is here tonight. He's sitting right there beyond the post. We'll hear from him in just a few moments. Now you know why Get Konnected made the Boston Magazine list last year of events not to miss in Boston. Another important Get Konnected partner is the Boston Foundation and the host of tonight's event. TBF is one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the United States. Serving the greater Boston area, it's made up of some 1,000 separate charitable funds established by thousands of donors over more than 100 years. I'm not surprised that the TBF has partnered with Get Konnected. Under Paul Gauguin's leadership, the Boston Foundation has become Boston's premier civic leader, think tank, convener, and advocacy organization, commissioning research into the most critical issues of our time and helping to shape public policy designed to advance opportunity for everyone in Greater Boston. And it's my pleasure to invite Paul Gauguin to the podium to officially welcome you on behalf of the Foundation.
Karen, thank you for that wonderful and very generous introduction. But I think we ought to give a big round of applause to Karen Holmes Ward, who is out here with us at so many events. She has been such a presence for us over the years. So Karen, thanks for being here for this very special evening. You know, I see so many people who are regulars at the Foundation, but for those of you who may be here for the first time tonight, I want to give you a particularly warm welcome, and I hope you feel welcome because this is your community foundation. And as part of our role as the Community Foundation serving Greater Boston, we do convenings, but few of them are as dramatic as this, I will say. So it's just a great pleasure for us to play this role, and as it was for us to be an early supporter of Get Konnected. You know, we like to say we were there at the beginning at the Boston Foundation for so many important initiatives and organizations, and we are very, very proud to have been involved with this organization from the start. As was said, we're co-hosting this evening with the Chamber of Commerce. Very pleased to do that. They're great partners, and we're going to hear from Jim Rooney of the Chamber shortly. But first, I want to recognize the person behind the Get Konnected phenomenon, and that's Colette Phillips. Savvy, dynamic, a pioneer, visionary are terms often used to describe Colette. She is a force and a consummate connector, and we're all incredibly appreciative for her many contributions to the city. And as the city becomes more diverse, it's vital that we have initiatives like Get Konnected to connect, mentor, and grow leaders of color across all aspects of industry and community. And in effect, we all have to become willing to cross the boundaries that have held this city back so often. And the good news is those boundaries and barriers are coming down, but we got to speed it up. And this is one way to do that. I came to Boston for the first time to work for then Mayor Kevin White in 1975, and it is stunning what an urban renaissance has occurred here in a relatively short period of time. But we know that this renaissance has not extended its enormous benefits to all, and we face very serious issues and problems in getting that to happen. But again, gatherings like this are fundamental to making it happen. It is no fun for any of us to be in conversations with friends from around the country or to read again about Boston being near the top for all the lists that we don't want to be on. And that's got to change. And two ways it's going to change is with talent and ideas. And Governor Patrick was talking about that in the video. The second edition of the GK 100 list is being unveiled tonight and honors 100 leaders from across all sectors of our city for their achievements and contribution to their fields and our city. And I congratulate you. I'm particularly pleased that so many of the Foundation's former, current board members, staff, and partners are featured on this list and were featured on the inaugural list. So at the Boston Foundation, we're going to take total credit for this, the whole thing. No, we're not. But I would just close by saying I don't think anybody could be pessimistic, despite our challenges, could be pessimistic about the future of the city, looking out at what Governor Patrick described, but now we are so much larger, so more numerous. So again, thank you all for being here. We're in for a great evening.
Thank you so much, Paul. You know, I'm nervous now. I was at a Get Konnected event and met a gentleman by the name of Sushil Tuli from Leader Bank, and he holds all of the mortgages on all my properties. And he came and sat in the front row. I sent in all the checks, I promise. I sent everything in. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for hosting us here at the Boston Foundation. Now to the woman who almost needs no introduction. She's been called an innovator, a visionary, pioneer, role model, mentor, a social impact and value-based leader. Perhaps the January issue of Boston Magazine best sums her up in its headline, calling her Boston's Great Connector. Who needs LinkedIn when you have Colette Phillips? Now, those of us who are her friends or work in the media know that firsthand. Colette always finds ways to lift us all up and then remind us that rather than looking at the glass as half empty, we can come together and fill it up. She's the president and CEO of Colette Phillips Communications and the founder of Get Konnected. And shh, those in the back, shh. I give you Colette Phillips.
Sit down, sit down. You're embarrassing me. Before I begin, I would like us to take a moment to remember and honor two members of the inaugural GK 100 who are no longer here with us. That is Sylvia Farrell Jones, who was the president of the YW, Boston, and who passed away last fall after a long battle with cancer. And the second person is a business pioneer here in Boston, Ken Guscott, who died in a fire last summer. So just if we could take a moment just to remember them. Okay. I would like to give a big thank you to the Boston Foundation and to Paul and to Stephen, who was my partner in crime, and to the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce and Jim Rooney and Justin Kang, my other partner in crime, and to Sushil Tuli. If you're going to get a wonderful award, and I called up my friend Sushil and I said, Sushil, I need a sponsor for the awards. And he says, I'm all in. Just tell me how much. And he came on board. I think it's important to say that this kind of collaboration, I hope it's not lost on you. I always say that diversity and inclusion must be deliberate and intentional. It's interesting that two institutions, the Boston Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, a bank who is larger, and a small minority woman-owned business, collaborated to create tonight. This is what collaboration looks like, and this is the example that the pace setters and the business equity initiative is all about. It is bringing people together, businesses of color with institutions and others, for the purpose of really showing how we can begin to chip away at the barriers. So I hope that collaboration was not lost on you. It was deliberate and intentional. I also want to give a thank you to my staff, because this would not be possible without them. Mirav Ringo, Wego Gao, Hao Hun, Reed Langona, Kyla Miller, and Bonnie McDonald. Thank you all. I also wish to thank the selection committee, because we had many nominations, and let me tell you, it was not easy. So I want to ask if the selection committee is here. I see Paul Francisco. Would you all stand up so we can thank you for your hard work in really doing a yeoman's job at choosing. Let me just say that this list started way before 2016. It started over dinner with a very dear friend of mine who is here. Her name is Joyce Plotkin. This was about maybe 7, 8 years ago. We were talking about how Boston was changing, but yet we kept seeing the same people on the same list. And I told her I was going to do something about it, and I convened a group of people, including Helen Chin and Richard Soden and Keith Motley, and a number of others, Juvita Fontanaz, in my office. And we started to just germinate on this. And out of that came our first list in 2016. One would ask, do we need to have a GK 100 list of diverse people? Well, the reality is, if the people in this room were on this list, or on the many lists that are out there, I wouldn't have to create this. So I think it's important to document, to validate, and to celebrate Boston's diversity. We spend too much time looking at the glass as half empty. And when we look around here, the talent pool, the brain trust, you are what Boston is. And I want everybody to just take a quick moment and look back, just look around you and see the Boston of today. This is what Boston is, diverse and inclusive. It's hard to believe that Get Konnected is 10 years. I may have been the spark that started the fire, but it took many to stoke the flames and to continue to allow Get Konnected to grow and to flourish. Collaboration is the key to success because no one person or one organization can do it alone. When you decide to create a sea change, you need the 3 C's. You need courage, you need conviction, and you need commitment. But more importantly, you need advocate and allies. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. I want to call out the 6 partners, founding partners of Get Konnected. And I want to also say that they're all still very involved. The first was the city of Boston, who actually gave a grant to my company to hire someone to help us begin to coordinate Get Konnected. And my ally and advocate was a guy by the name of Andre Porter. And he went back and he sold it to his boss, Charlotte Gola Ritchie. And they decided that they liked the idea and the fact that I was hiring. And I'm happy to say that the mayor of Boston today continues to support Mayor Walsh, Get Konnected. Thank you, Mayor. The second was Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Juliet Mayers was my ally and advocate. And today, Stephanie Brown and Jay McQuaid and Andrew Dreyfus continues to support Get Konnected. No one would be surprised at our third founding sponsor, Eastern Bank. Bob Rivers came to a Get Konnected and he was sold. and he became our ally and advocate, and they are still a huge supporter. Mass General Hospital. Even though I was a trustee there, I didn't pitch them. Diane Austin came to a Get Konnected, and she went back and became my ally and advocate. And today she's here along with Jeff Davis. So thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Diane. The Boston Foundation, as Paul pointed out, Mary Jo Meisner, who was at the Boston Foundation at the time, came to a Get Konnected and said, this is exactly the kind of initiative we love to be involved with. And she came back and was our ally and advocate. And the last was EMC, now Dell. And our ally and advocate was a woman by the name of Jackie Glenn, whom you saw in the video. And she has continued to be our ally and advocate. And so it continues. As we celebrate our 10th anniversary, we wanted to honor 10 equity building ideas that could change Boston and make it, we want to become the most inclusive and equitable city in America. And we have the smarts, the innovation, the technology, the brain power sitting right here in this room to make that happen. So Get Konnected, I hope, continues to have an impact on our city in bringing cross-cultural, social, and business relationships and to grow. But we have to work together in partnership. We must do it if we are going to be the kind of city that we know we can become. We want to be that city on a hill, and we have the power to do that. It's sitting right in this room, so we can make that happen. So thank you all. Congratulations to all the honorees, and I just want to, again, say I am delighted to honor you, to leverage you, and to thank you for your contribution to our city.
Thank you, Colette, for everything that you do. Now, before we ask the mayor to say a few words, I'm going to ask my colleague Byron Barnett to come up front. You know, if you watch Channel 7, WHDH, come on, Byron, or Channel 4, or hopefully Channel 5. You know, the news stories are about 1 minute and 20 seconds long, right, Byron?
Sometimes even shorter.
Sometimes even shorter. Well, Colette says you have 3 minutes to speak. Oh. It's a lot of time.
Is that all? Well, let me get my little 3 minutes out here. Yes. Well, I guess I'm speaking for all the honorees, which is quite an honor. So first thing I'd like to say is thank you, and on behalf of all the other honorees, thank you very much. I'm especially honored to be here in such great company with my fellow honorees. And on behalf of my honorees, my heartfelt thanks goes out to Colette Phillips for her dogged efforts in creating Get Konnected, very special networking platform that's, I believe, had a major impact on the city of Boston and beyond. By creating Get Konnected, Colette has helped move Boston forward by creating a new lens through which our city can be viewed. Now, I'm not a native of Boston, but I've been here long enough to know what I'm talking about. You know, I've long since fallen in love with Boston. I think it's one of the greatest cities in the country, and I am very proud to live in the hub of the universe. We all know what that means. But, as we all know, Boston has changed over the years. When I came to Boston in 1983, all of my black and brown friends in my hometown of Minneapolis, and my white friends as well, They all told me, Byron, watch out, be careful. We hear Boston's not a very friendly place to people of color. Well, when I got here, I figured out pretty quickly that Boston, from a racial standpoint, was really not that different than any other city. But Boston did have its unique twists and little quirks here. One of them, as everybody knows, the busing saga, which essentially gave Boston a kind of a national reputation. This, of course, again, 1983, when the city was still feeling the hangover of the busing crisis, and emotions regarding race were still very raw. Now, the movers and shakers, this is another change of the city, something else that was going on. Then the movers and shakers of the city consisted of a clubby little group known as a group of guys known as the Vault. Now, I fear if you hear a few murmurs there. The murmurs, I notice, are coming from people who are of a certain age, I guess. I realize, I mentioned this to somebody tonight earlier. A couple of people I was talking to, I said, the what? What is that? I said, just ask someone who's over 50 and they'll tell you. But times have changed and the city has grown. Much of that growth has been because of the sweeping demographic changes that are taking place across the country and even here in Boston. Boston, as you know, is now a majority minority city. And I think more and more of us are beginning to realize that we can't continue to act like separate tribes and fight over our differences, but instead work together to celebrate our differences, celebrate what we have in common. I think we're fortunate to have a mayor who recognizes this, so a little shout out to the Honorable Mayor Marty Walsh. And I'd like to give one more little shout out to someone, I can't say it to everyone, but I would like to mention Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung. Now, where did Shirley go? Oh, there she is. She was sitting right there. I say this from the bottom of my heart. There is no better advocate for the city of Boston than Shirley. She shows us every day in her columns in the Globe. Celebrating diversity is something that I've always tried to do on my Sunday morning show, Urban Update, to shine a light on people and ideas that broaden the city's scope beyond the traditional seats of power. One of those people is Colette Phillips, and one of those ideas that came from her is Get Konnected. I can't tell you how proud I am that we featured her on our first show when she launched Get Konnected 10 years ago. And we've had her on the show many times since then, examining ideas about diversity and bringing people together in a way that only Get Konnected can. So, again, on behalf of all of the honorees, I'm proud to have been associated with Get Konnected and all that it stands for, and from the bottom of my heart, I'm truly honored to receive this honor, as all of my fellow awardees are as well. Thank you very much. Was that 3 minutes? Was that 3 minutes, Colette?
That was the whole newscast. Byron made a point of speaking about the Vault, and the only African American to ever lead the Vault, sitting right here in the front row, Mr. Fletcher Flash Wiley. Raise your hand, sir. And if you have time, grab a drink and talk to Flash about what happened after his term at the Vault. It's a very interesting story, right? Okay. Yeah, okay. Now, following comments from our mayor, you're going to be treated to our fireside chat that's moderated by the Boston Globe associate editor and business columnist, Shirley Leung. But first, Mayor Walsh really needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him an introduction. He was one of the Get Konnected's 2014 Diversity Game Changers, White Men Who Can Jump honorees. He's a lifelong champion of working people and a proud product of the city of Boston. He was sworn into a second term on January 1st, 2018. He has a very bold vision for Boston, that of a thriving, healthy, and innovative Boston, a city with equality and opportunity for all. He's led Boston to the forefront of the global innovation economy by attracting industry-leading private sector employers, upgrading the city's digital infrastructure, and using technology to transform government services, everything from a parking meter payment app, which I use, to a new city website. He led the charge for gender and pay equity for women in the city of Boston and is now working with the Chamber and the business community to address issues of wealth and income gap and disparity among communities of color. So it's no surprise that the mayor jumped at this opportunity to participate in this fireside chat on solutions to make Boston a more inclusive and equitable city. Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor of the city of Boston, Marty Walsh.
How are you? Good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you. And Byron, it's great to hear you up here. Karen mentioned that I jumped at this opportunity. This is how it went. I got a text. I was told when the date was, and I said, be there. And I said, okay, Colette, whatever you want. And that's how I ended up here today. So let me just, I'm going to talk about Colette in a second. Paul Grogan, thank you for hosting us today. To all the people that are here, thank you. I think the President of the City Council is here, Andrea Campbell. Thank you, Madam President, for being here as well. I was talking when I came in with Linda DeCina Forey, and what she said was, look around this room, as Colette said, and I know there's a lot of people here that are here tonight, but this is what Boston should look like every day, what this room is. And, you know, Colette Phillips, you're a special person, and there's a lot of accolades here tonight, but from the very first time that I met you, and through today, you've been a mentor. You've helped me tremendously in the city and our policies. But what you've put here tonight together and what you do every time, I just want to say thank you because you truly, Paul talked a little bit about when he was in city government, and we talked about 1983 in city government and the challenges our city has faced over the years. But this truly is an opportunity for us to continue to change in a positive way. So thank you, Colette, for all that you do for us. I agree with you, Byron, when you talk about Shirley and her columns. Most of the columns she writes are great, except for the ones she criticizes me every now and then. But I want to thank you. No, but Shirley certainly is a cheerleader for the city of Boston in so many different ways, with so many different issues. So I want to thank Shirley as well. And to my fellow panelists, thank you for being here tonight as well. This is going to be a great conversation. I want to congratulate all the honorees tonight and for being recognized. An important list to be on. This is the most important list you can be on in the city of Boston, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So congratulations to all of you. Get Konnected has done an incredible job, as we all know in this room, in strengthening diversity outreach in the city and bringing people together. And as I said, there's oftentimes that there'll be issues that will come up and different people will call me about different ideas. And Colette always has a strong opinion on how to move the agenda forward, whether that's an issue that's read about negatively in the newspaper or something that's positively being done. Talking with her network on how do we advance the agendas forward. She is there, so I want to thank you. We're all here because we want to meet people and talk about pressing issues, which we're going to talk about in a little way. But it's also about a more equitable future for our city. To build that future, we must have an honest and sometimes difficult conversations about the past. And that's something that we're not shying away from. That's why we began to have conversations on citywide conversations on race and understanding the terminology of white privilege, understanding the terminology of systemic racism, understand the terminology that so many people don't fully understand. And the dialogues on race is one of those ways to continue to educate people on how we move our city forward. We must also be ready to follow up with intentional action. This isn't just conversations that we have to have. We have to have intentional action. And I think tonight is a step in that way to have a dialogue, but an also understanding of how do we do that. At City Hall, I'm proud to say that a first for Boston is that 50% of the people that have been hired have been people of color in the city of Boston. That's not to get applause, because that doesn't deserve an applause. That is what we should be doing, and we have to continue to do more. Our command staff, Commissioner Evans is here with us, has been the most diverse command staff ever in the history of our city. That doesn't deserve applause either. That should happen in a city like Boston, Massachusetts. We created an Office of Resiliency, and we are partnering with the Himes Foundation right now to move that conversation forward. We started with the Rockefeller Foundation with 100 Resilient Cities, and the Himes Foundation stepped up and said we want to be a partner in that. And again, I want to thank the Himes Foundation for that. It shows that we did a report. There was a new survey that was released this morning about the opportunity on race relations in Boston. It shows that Bostonians are concerned about racial barriers that still exist, but they're optimistic about the progress. And that progress isn't the progress that I've made or we've made in City Hall. It's the progress that collectively people in this room have made over generations, and I want to thank you for that. I also this morning gave an annual address at the Municipal Research Bureau, and we talked about Boston and being committed to building an economy that works for everybody. And one of the proud facts that I'm not proud of, but I'm happy about, is a recent Brookings Institute study showed that between 2014 and 2016, inequality in our city narrowed by 17%. We fell from #1 inequality city in America to #7. That's a big improvement, but that doesn't mean our work is done, because we still have a lot more work to do, and we're going to continue to work and move forward. A big part of this breakdown is systemic racism. Racial equity has been the central goal of what we've been talking about at City Hall in every department, in every single initiative that we create. That work spans from building more affordable housing, to creating more job opportunities for low-income residents, to expanding high-quality pre-kindergarten for all of our children. Breaking down barriers of inequality must be a group effort. We need everyone to be involved in that conversation. I'm inspired by the dedicated work that's happening in the city every single day across all different industries. And I want to thank you in this room for pushing that, and for pushing me, and pushing us, and pushing other elected officials that are here tonight and that aren't here tonight. I'm looking forward to hearing from our panelists. I am done talking now because Colette's giving me the eye. So I want to thank you very much for being here tonight. Up here? Thank you.
I'm waiting for my cue. We're going to go on Twitter, so live on Twitter, so that's kind of exciting. Oh, I guess that's my cue. So welcome, everybody, to the 10th anniversary of Get Konnected. We're here to celebrate Boston's 100 influential people of color, and also 10 game-changing equity ideas. We are again live on Twitter tonight, and we have this great panel tonight. We just heard from Mayor Marty Walsh. He's on our panel. We have Bennie Wiley. She is the president of the Wiley Group, and she's also the former president of the Partnership, which has worked very hard to advance minorities in this town. We have Betty Francisco, who is the general counsel of Compass Working Capital. It's a group that gives financial coaching to low-income families, and she's also the co-founder of Latina Circle. And last but not least is Bob Rivers, the chairman and CEO of Eastern Bank. So we've had a long introduction, and we've heard from a lot of speakers tonight, so I won't kind of recreate what we talked about. But basically, we're going to have I fully expect to have a robust conversation with our panel tonight, but I really hope that at the end of the evening, this will inspire action here and out there to make Boston a more welcoming place to live and work. So I'm going to, as we talked about earlier, we're going to divide this into 3 parts, this conversation. And the first part, I'm just very curious if you guys could talk about, I consider this a lightning round, as I described earlier to you guys. You know, Boston is considered a progressive place to live. But why has systemic racism persisted here? Can you capture the why in a single word or a short phrase? Why does systemic racism persist. Bob, do you want to start?
Sure, sure. I think you captured it at the open. It's more words than action.
More words than action. Betty?
I would say there's still white privilege and white power.
I would say there's not a visible presence of power and influence from communities of color, and so there's no consequence for racist behavior.
I'm going to say a few more words. 4 centuries of racism, not enough conversation about the past.
Okay. Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty concise for you.
Yeah. That was on the record.
So again, we wanted to move beyond just talk and go straight to action. So really the heart of our conversation tonight is about initiatives. And so I was hoping each of you could talk about one initiative that you're really excited about that will close inequities in our community. Betty, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I'm going to talk about 2. One is a shameless plug for the one that I launched, which is through Latina Circle. It's called Amplify Latinx. And my co-founder, Inela Roman, is over there. And she is one of the idea changers. The idea behind Amplify Latinx was back after the elections was to really bring the Latino community together to focus on building power and impact. As many of you know, the Boston Latino population is now at 20%, and yet our leadership representation falls well below that number. And a lot of the issues that the Boston Globe Spotlight featured impacts, a lot of those inequities impact both African Americans as well as Latinos. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was figure out how do we create this sense of urgency for young people in particular, for Latinos to start to come out and want to do more for their communities. So Amplify Latinx is a collaborative, nonpartisan initiative focused on building Latino power and impact, particularly in elected leadership. When we launched it back in 2017, we did it at the EMK, which was very symbolic for a lot of Latinos. And it was to give them a sense of this is what power looks like. This is where decisions are made. And in order for us to begin to change the dialogue and to have an impact on policy, we need to have more people that represent the communities that we serve. So Amplify Latinx has had an amazing response, especially among young people. Many of them who were not that interested in civic engagement now want to go out and vote. They want to explore running for office or supporting candidates. And they just want to get generally more involved in their communities by volunteering. And that's the spark that we wanted. And then our goal is to really begin to look at how do we build this community, especially the leaders, and put them into positions where they could have real change made. And so we now have over 90 partners. We have at least 2,500 subscribers at this point, and we're looking to really grow that exponentially. The second initiative I wanted to talk about was Pipeline Angels, which is a program that I participated in, and it is an initiative to expand capital for women entrepreneurs. So Pipeline Angels is a boot camp for women so that they can learn how to become angel investors and to start changing access to capital for women. And when it launched in 2011, there weren't that many women angel investors, at least here, that just wanted to learn how to do it. And so I participated in the program in 2015, and part of the goal was to figure out how do we get more women to invest. And as a result, now the Angel Capital Association has recognized Pipeline Angels for really starting to change the game for women, because we can't expect that the landscape all of a sudden in terms of getting capital is gonna change for women. And so if we can teach more women to invest and support women-owned businesses, we can really drive change that way.
Mm-hmm. Jump in, Benny or Bob, or
okay, I can jump in. I was listening to Betty and I was thinking there's so many good initiatives in Boston. I mean, it's so hard to even say, they're old ones, they're new ones, but they're all, so how we work together and build upon it, I think is going to be a part, hopefully, of this conversation. I continue to be excited about the partnership and the role that it plays in closing inequities in the city. And for those of you who are not familiar with the partnership, it was really born out of the racial tension that Byron talked about earlier, that from enforced busing here in the city of Boston, when the racial tensions were very visible and difficult. There were two organizations that were created to try to address that, one by the mayor at the time, Kevin White, whose approach was to bring together the power centers of the city, the political, the business, the church, and the media, and then another group that was started by business and civic leaders that said we need to look at the underlying factors that contribute to racial tension. They coexisted for a number of years. Racial tensions became less visible, and the funding community said, figure out how to work together, who's going to survive, and that's actually where the name of the partnership came into being. But what the partnership has been doing all these years, and the partnership just celebrated 30 years, is really trying to address the issue of building a critical mass of people of color who are staying in the city, who become committed to the city. We were experiencing a brain drain. Someone talked about, maybe it was Byron also, that people would come and get a degree or get an experience or get a skill that they needed in order to advance in their career, but they never really thought about putting down roots and staying in Boston. So we were experiencing this brain drain. So the first thing the partnership did was say, okay, we got to first try to reverse that, retain this talent, develop this talent into being leaders, keeping them here, so we start addressing the demographics, and giving them the tools and the strategies and the relationships that they need in order to continue to be able to thrive, both within their professions and then being able to influence the civic and political fabric of the city. And I think demographics, there were so many things I thought of when we said, what are some of the factors that contribute to persistence of racial tension here in the city? And I think that we're not really present, demographically present. So the partnership's been around 30 years. About 4,000 people have gone through the programs. 300 companies still are involved with it. We can name so many success stories, some who are K100 participants, people who are here largely because of the partnership, but they've succeeded in their own right. And I think it's a strategy that's so successful that a lot of other cities continue to come to the partnership to try to learn how they can replicate it there. So it's a solution that we ought to continue to build upon.
Indeed, and I would just follow on that, Bennie. I share your optimism because I think the action is starting to finally match the words that we've said over many years and decades, and not just the initiatives that are being honored tonight, and this is a great opportunity to learn about those, but others. My colleague Glenn Lloyd in the Business Equity Initiative, a capacity building program that's unique and innovative in its own right, that's really driving really some impact and some change. The Growth Front that Paul Grogan and his team, Orlando Watkins, have put together to provide more creative and patient capital to minority business enterprises. So between those two initiatives addressing the capacity gaps for businesses of color and the capital gaps are essential, but I will tell you the one that I'm most excited about that I think will have, of all of the things that I've heard about, is Jim Rooney's initiative at the Chamber and the Pacesetter initiative, and what he and his team have done, in particular, Justin Kang, Sheena Collier, bringing together the largest companies in the private sector across Greater Boston to commit to increasing their spend to really drive revenue to these enterprises is really the most important and, to this point, missing ingredient that we have had. Because there have been other capacity building programs. There are other people who have tried capital. And let's face it, you can have all the capacity building and capital in the world, but if you don't have revenue coming in to build the business, it's really hard to move forward. And there are a number of pace setters in the room. Tufts Health Plan is here. Certainly the Chamber's a part of it. Eastern's a part of it. Many others. And I will tell you, you know, as we went into talking about this at Chamber meetings, because I'm proud to be on Jim's board at the Chamber, was talking about let's not recreate the wheel and take another model that's been very successful. So it might strike you as unusual that we actually followed a model that the mayor put together around pay equity. And you'd say, what does pay equity have to do with supplier diversity? Well, as you know, the 100% Compact for Pay Equity, again, brings together the largest companies and organizations throughout Greater Boston to commit to submit their data on their compensation among men and women, and brings together human resources managers and others on a quarterly basis to share best practices on how we can improve and move forward. So rather than recreate the wheel, simply what the Chamber did, and no surprise, because Jim was the private sector leader for the 100% Compact, we basically replicated the model that the Boston Women's Workforce Commission put together. And again, credit to so many people to what is now pace setters, and again, very optimistic about what that will finally bring. It started now with 10 organizations and companies, but it will grow, and I think that's going to have tremendous impact over time.
You know, I think this is one area where government has a big place to play. We launched in January a program called Boston Hires, where we're going to train 20,000 low-income, underemployed people in the city of Boston to be working in the workforce by the year 2022, and that there'll be effects of that, big effects of that. So I think that's one area. I think the second area is universal pre-kindergarten, high quality. That is a must. We cannot let another generation of young people not get the start they deserve in education. When you look and see, when you look and see the challenges that we have in the city of Boston, whether it's poverty, inequality, the penal system, the common theme is many of these young people didn't get the start they needed in the beginning, and they quit school. So I think that as we think about the 20,000 employees that we're going to be pushing for the older people, we have to give those young people a strong, solid foundation. Or 20 years from now, there's going to be people sitting up here at this podium talking about inequality, talking about racism, talking about poverty, talking about the judicial system. We have to change that conversation. And I think that everything was mentioned here tonight is important, and it's a piece of a puzzle. And we have to make sure as we work collectively together to make sure that we have the entire puzzle.
Indeed.
Off of this universal pre-K, I mean, in Boston, you're pretty far ahead of other towns on offering pre-K, right? But how do you scale that? I mean, I have kids 5 and 7. And 7 years ago, I think it cost about $25,000 to put an infant in daycare, full-time daycare. Today, it's $35,000, $40,000 a year. I was 45 if you're in downtown. I was shocked. I thought 25,000 was too much. I think that's how much my parents paid for college tuition. And so now it's actually almost as expensive to put your kid in daycare it is to put them through college. So how do you fix that equation? How do you get more kids in early ed?
We can scale it. You know, one of the first things we did was we put together an advisory committee to look at universal pre-kindergarten in Boston, and that's what we looked at. And what we realized, we were looking at universal high-quality pre-kindergarten, which means that we work with our private nonprofit partners. We work with the City of Boston School Department. We work with our charter schools, our private schools, and all of the different areas. So we did a chart, and we realized in the City of Boston, we're nearly universal pre-kindergarten in Boston right now with the nonprofits. You send your children. What we wanted to do is look at high quality. That makes the big difference when it comes to high quality. And right now we have a bill in front of the legislature that would shift the convention center funds money that's raised in the city of Boston. It was there for the expansion. The expansion is not happening right now. If we receive that $16 million, we'd be able to put in place a program next year for 4,000 4-year-old is to have high-quality pre-kindergarten, whether it's in the City of Boston School Department or it's in a private setting. And we have a system in place so when a parent sends their child to a Boys and Girls Club or a YMCA, they will know in kindergarten where that child's going to school. And that makes all the difference in the world. And the way we scale it up is we don't have to necessarily look at the whole state and do it across the board, because not every city and town wants it. But start in Boston and start in a handful of cities. Let's get it right, and let's scale it up as we move forward. That's a game changer. We talk about game changers all day long, and that's how we can scale this program up. Not only that, but you have people investing then in our local public schools, where they're not moving out of the city of Boston, they're not leaving, they're staying here in the city. So, I mean, it's something I'm going to continue to push. We have 1,000 children in September going into universal pre-kindergarten in the city of Boston. We're watching those outcomes. All national studies shows that Boston, even though we're not to scale yet, has the best pre-K kindergarten program in the country. New York modeled their program after us. So now what we're looking to do is how do we get the revenue to move forward? We have to make the investment in our kids. If we don't make the investment in our kids, then we might as well not make investments in anything.
Bob, what about the private sector? Should the private sector start footing the bill for early education?
No question. I think certainly in many ways companies do through charitable contributions, but we have to do more. I mean, one of the most frustrating things about the federal tax plan and the tax cut, and it put more money in the pockets of everyone in the private sector, including Eastern Bank. But it went the wrong way. We couldn't afford to give up the revenue. I mean, I really would echo and applaud the mayor's drive towards universal pre-K. I would go to the other end of the spectrum as well, where we need universal free community college as well, and we need greater funding of ESL.
Okay.
So, but that's
who's
going to be
going to pay for that?
Well, we went the wrong way in the tax. In the end of the day, we all, as taxpayers, whether we be businesses or wealthy individuals, have to pay more. I mean, the math just doesn't work without it. And in the end, I think the economic benefits are clear, and in ways that some we can quantify and others that we can't. But we just know in terms of the quality of life or just reduction in spending in addressing so many other societal effects that come out when you don't make these investments. To me, again, that's pretty clear. Not a popular statement, I imagine, among some in the private sector, but one I absolutely believe.
Can I just jump in for a minute? Just for a second here. You know, and Bob is absolutely right. We're putting together our budget. Tomorrow the school committee is going to vote on the City of Boston school budget. It's going to be $1.3 billion. We're making a $50 billion investment in our educational system. $50 million this year alone. You know, sure, I'd like to go out and buy a new fleet of trucks for public works, or I'd like to build all new buildings for our city buildings in the City of Boston. But you have to prioritize what's important. And what's important here is the future of Boston, the future of Massachusetts, the future of America is the young people. They showed it on Saturday at the march, and we have to make sure that we continue to look at how do we make those investments, those smart investments moving forward. Whether that's the private sector, the public sector, but we have to prioritize where it is we should be spending the money.
Bennie, I want to jump back to what you talked about earlier about you know, why systemic racism has persisted, and this also you know, aligns with your work at the partnership. So what would it take to get more people of color in positions of power and influence in this town? I mean, this is a very unusual room to see such diversity. If you go to other business events in town, you know, it's a sea of, as I like to say, you see white people everywhere. And so, so how do we change that dynamic? I mean, you've been at it at the partnership has been at for 30 years, but we haven't moved the needle on it.
Well, I disagree. I think we have moved the needle.
Okay, or I should say.
So we may not be where we want to be.
Yes.
And what I didn't say in my opening remarks is that, and this kind of relates to what the mayor said, is systemic racism exists throughout America. And it exists throughout America. I mean, this does get to Boston. It exists throughout America because race has been such a part of our history, such a complicated part of our history, and it's very layered, and it's very emotionally charged, so we don't deal with it because it contradicts everything that this country says it's about. And so part of the problem is we don't even talk about it, which is something that the mayor mentioned. So I think what I was trying to say is, yes, so it exists nationwide. What's different, I think, for Boston, when you compare us to other large metropolitan cities, somewhat is demographics. Demographics simplifies it, is that there's no visible presence. And when I say positions of power and influence, I mean elected offices, I mean corporate leadership, I mean civic leadership, but also mean walking in certain communities and seeing brown people. You just, you know, you can go to a lot of communities in Boston and you don't see people. I also mean people getting out and voting and having precinct captains. So, you know, where we're really asserting our political and economic influence and power. So I think one of the things when we talk about kind of what do we do collaboratively, there are things that we can continue to do at the level of trying to, you know, bring people into the companies and helping them to have the skills that they need, helping the companies to better understand what it takes to advance everyone. And people of color, and creating environments in which we do develop leaders, but it's also some of the things that we need to do, I think, on a more grassroots level that really asserts our influence as a community. I don't know if that's making any sense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I just say another, one of the things I see from my vantage point is I feel that the people in power stay in power here. And so it's very hard to create turnover, to disrupt, and so people have to wait their turn. Women and people have to wait their turn to you know, whether it's running for office or you know, becoming a leader.
That's changing.
It is changing.
And I think that exists everywhere too. I mean,
Yes.
there's not a presumption of competence when it comes to people of color. You've got to be tested, you know, twice as often as other people. There's not you don't get the stretch assignments. I mean, there are a lot of things that aren't unique to Boston. And so trying to think about what we do about it here. Yeah. We have people that are beginning to do that now, that are saying, you know, I'm not, if we wait for people to leave, it's not going to happen. So we just, no, go ahead.
To jump in real quick, I mean, one of the things that we've seen with Amplify is that young people want to participate, but we've told them no. We've said, wait your turn, you're a pipeline, you don't know how to do it, work for somebody else first and get experience. They have the experience to do it now, but we're holding them back. And what we're seeing with electeds in particular, they're incredible young Latino electeds that at 23, 24, 25 going into office and proposing radical policy changes. And so we need that change in mindset. That's why they're being voted in. So I think, I do agree there's this sense of, you know, invisibility to some extent, but I'm tired of saying we're invisible because clearly we're not. Look at us here in this room. It's just people are not looking. And when we look at, you know, who are the Latinos, because we span multiple races. There's white Latinos, black Latinos. You don't always know who identifies. There are many more than you think, and many are successful, many are contributing, but we need to identify them, create visibility for them, and I think that's something that we can all do and play a role in. And I'll say, just to jump in for the Boston City Council, it's not, we have 6 women and of color. I mean, they're role models. They're amazing. They're going to inspire young and not so young women to keep running, and that's what we need, more role models.
But I think when you think about politics too, though, in Boston, it always goes back to, I mean, obviously the mayor's office has always been a white man, but when you look around Boston, you know, Ralph Martin was African American, and he won the district attorney's race. He won West Roxbury, and he won parts of Dorchester, and he won neighborhoods. And you look what happened there, the sheriff's department with Andrea Cabral and now Steve Tompkins, and you look at the legislature. In the Globe report, it talked about the lack of people of color in the legislature, and they compared it to the whole Commonwealth. But if you break down the Boston numbers, I think the Boston number is 50% of the Boston delegation of people of color in the House of Representatives. So you start looking there, you look at the city council. There's Felix Arroyo's here, the first Latino elected to the Boston City Council, who's here. I'm feeling a change, and I think the change isn't with necessarily a person of color running. The change is with who's supporting people. And I think that that's going to be the difference. It's not going to be white people supporting white people, Latinos supporting Latino people. You're seeing that change. I'm seeing it right now in the district attorney's race, where people are all over the road with everybody, and everyone has different constituencies. So I think that all of that work from the 70s and 80s and 90s and early 2000s is paying off. And you're starting to see people running for office, and they're getting support not because of the color of their skin, but because of who they are and what they represent, whether they're a young person that's upsetting the apple cart, or whether I'm feeling that difference. I feel it in the council this year. Obviously, 6 women of color on the council is making a difference. We see it with the different delegations, and I think that in some cases, Boston is getting ahead of. Now, Governor Patrick obviously was elected governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. He stayed 2 terms, and that's been the history in that race. There will be a person of color in the mayor's race. There is no in the mayor's office. There is no question in my mind that that's happening. It might happen the next mayor, but it's going to happen because there's so many talented young people they're talented people in elective office that are building up a base to be able to be super competitive for this seat and for other seats.
I want to go back to the initiatives that we talked about earlier tonight, and I write a lot about diversity, and so as a result, I actually have everybody coming out of the woodwork and talking to me about their initiative. I'm actually struck by what everybody is doing, but they're small, they're pilot. How do we scale them? I mean, I think the pace setters is an attempt to scale, right? To scale, to get drive revenue for all these minority-owned businesses. But I guess my question is, do we need to create another organization? We love doing that, creating organizations to kind of drive diversity or to kind of take take diversity to the next level? Or do we have leaders in place but how do we collaborate more?
I just think we need to work more together. We certainly, I look at, what Paul and his team are doing with the Growth Fund. I mean, we partner with the Boston Foundation on that because we know that they have a much bigger brand, bigger reach to build that fund more than if we went and decided to do that on our own. Same thing with doing something like the pace setters. We as an individual firm could never do that as quickly or as effectively as the chamber. And I think that those kinds of examples, there's lots of ideas that we've talked about tonight that if we just better work together and collaborated on how we can leverage our collective strengths and resources, that would take us a long way.
I agree with that. I don't think, not that new organizations aren't needed. You definitely always need new organizations, but I think collaboration is key. What Bob talked about earlier was when the pay equity for women. We started out with 20 companies. We're up to 100 companies giving information now on pay equity. That's making a difference. I'm not saying the result was John Hancock, but John Hancock brought on the first woman ever to run that company. So we start to set that trend. I think Jimmy Rooney did it when he was at the Convention Center Authority, when he put out bids and forcing participation from people of color in those bids. And that was key because as you start to think, the Convention Center Hotel that just went out has involvement in it. In the different projects that we have in the city of Boston, everybody's coming to me with a proposal. Oh, by the way, we have Building Pathways part of it, or we have this organization part of it, we have this group of people of color part of it. We need to continue to push, and the leaders of our city and the leaders of our organizations need to insist that as we move forward, that moving forward brings change.
Mm-hmm. This is my call to action to this group. I would love to see something like what the city did with pay equity, where there's a recognizable group people can work together, because I feel like everybody is doing some great initiatives. I mean, they'll be highlighted in the GK10, and a lot of these initiatives I've never heard of, and but maybe there's a way that, I don't know, you guys, this is your realm, to think about how can we better organize ourselves around diversity initiatives that already exist, and scale the ones that look incredibly promising. That are working, exactly.
And use data to measure it to make sure it's working.
Right, right.
Thank you. I got one fan out there. Thank you.
All right. So this question is to the white guys on the panel. All right, the white guys who dared to be on this panel about race. So I thank you, Mayor Walsh and Bob, for being on this panel. So I want to know, what do white men say in private about race?
She didn't tell them this before.
I know.
That's a surprise.
What do white men say in private about racial inequities in Boston, and do they really think there is a problem?
I'll answer that first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we won't mention his name. I think we had our second race dialogue at the Cutler Majestic Theater, and one of the people in the audience got up. I don't know where she was from, but she criticized us for having it was at Northeastern, criticized us for having the conversation in Northeastern, and we should have had that conversation in Roxbury. And that's not where the conversation on race needs to happen. The conversation on race needs to happen in the white neighborhoods. So people understand what the terms around racism means. I quoted after there was an incident in Boston, I forget what it was, and I made a comment on TV about something, and a couple of the folks that work with me called me up and they said, well, it was insensitive what you said. So what I did was I brought a bunch of people together, people of color, in my office, in the Eagle Room, to talk about what I said and the terminology I used. And we got into a conversation about white privilege. And we got into a conversation about being white in Boston and being a person of color in Boston. And it went to a conversation, and this was Will Morales, about learning how to drive. And he talked about when he teaches his son how to drive, you teach them how to start the car, how to put it in drive, and how to put it in park, parallel park, reverse, go forward. And then he said, when you get pulled over, I taught my son to take his wallet out, put it on the dashboard, put your two hands on the wheel, and look straight ahead. And when you get approached by the police officer, yes sir, no sir. And to me, that was like being hit in the head with a 2x4, because I thought to myself, that's not how I learned to drive. And I think the conversations need to happen throughout the entire city, but they have to happen so people understand what it means to walk in the shoes of a person of color, a black person, Latino person, a person of color, to understand fully how people feel. And I think that, as a mayor, you think, I know what that might feel like because I'm in rooms all day and I talk to people, but I don't think I fully understand. And I don't think the average person fully understands. And I think what's happening in conversations around America are probably some very bad conversations about, oh my God, those people get all the things that they asked for and we get this. That's not moving us forward. And I think that, an understanding has to happen first. And that's why I think it's so important to have a conversation. I think it's so important that everyone leaves here today, and whether you work with somebody or you don't know somebody, have the racial conversation with them. Explain to them what's going on, because that's where true racial justice and equity will come into play. When we have more, and that's why I think it's so important for us with young people that we get them in school earlier, and we teach them almost a different way, because that generation can grow up much different than anyone in this room if we do have these conversations now.
Well, I first have to thank the mayor. He gave me a lot of time to think about the answer. I think it's Shirley. I think it's like anything. I think it sort of depends on who you talk to and who they are. And I think they're probably basically three groups. I mean, the data is irrefutable, right? So the facts are there, and with respect to income, wealth, inequality, and so many other things that are different among those who are white and those who are of color. So I think the facts are without dispute. It's how you react to the facts, and I think that there's one group that acknowledges the facts, but for whatever reason, isn't engaged in doing anything about them. I wouldn't say that necessarily they don't care. They might have other things to do. I don't think they're opposed in any way. It's just a group that's just never going to sort of come along, or they're going to be the last to come along. I think on the other end of the scale, there's a group, and certainly the mayor's a shining example of this, a group that gets the data, but it's beyond the intellectual. They feel it in the core of their being, and they're led to wanting to do something about it, and they know what to do about it. And they've been in it long enough in the work, and they know others who are doing the work. They know what to do. And then I think there's a group in the middle that wants to do something but doesn't know how. And I think that's the power of so many initiatives that we've talked about tonight. To the extent that they are engaged in those initiatives, it shows them the way forward in terms of how to do it. And what I'm seeing is a growing number in that middle group. In terms of those that, as leadership changes in companies. I mean, look at the pace-setter companies. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but I think every single one of those pace-setter organization is led by a white male. Every single one. And yet those are the folks that are coming together to really try to figure it out together, and that's a group that'll grow.
Well, we need allies. So allies and advocates, as Colette was saying earlier. So I'm going to have one last question because the night is getting long, and I think Boston Foundation's cut out the AC or something, sending us a message. The heat or something, I don't know. So, and we might make this another lightning round, okay? Just one last question, which is, so let's say all these initiatives, let's say all these policy changes take root. We have universal pre-K, for lots of kids in many towns. All these initiatives have scaled. We've collaborated. Let's look into the future. 10 years from now, 2028. So paint a picture of what Boston would look like. I mean, maybe it's a word or a phrase. I don't know if you can get 3 phrases again, but Mayor Walsh, but what would it look like, though? You've kind of said your answer already, but what would it look like? How would Boston be a different place to live and work? Betty, why don't you start us off?
Well, I can't do 3 phrases. But I think we'd have thriving neighborhoods. We'd have innovation centers in neighborhoods that right now, like Dudley or Mattapan Square. We would have the wealth would spread. We would have. I'm from New York City, and when I first came here, I said, "Where are all the brown people?" It wasn't integrated. So we need to integrate our neighborhoods more, and we need to create economic opportunities for all. And that starts with education, investing more in education. I love the idea of universal pre-K, but along the whole continuum, investing more in our schools, in our teachers, having more teachers that reflect our kids. And then I think helping families build wealth. I mean, the one way to really start to get into this income inequality and wealth inequality is to help build assets. And not enough families have those opportunities. So Boston would look like a place where everybody is prosperous, they're thriving, they have opportunities to do better for their families.
It's hard to add anything to that because she painted a beautiful picture. But in addition, I see more businesses of color, and so that the communities are truly diverse in all of its aspects. So your neighborhoods would be diverse, but your vendors would be, your services, your leaders. And it would be vibrant and exciting and energizing and highly productive because people would feel good about who they are and what the opportunities are for them.
I think welcoming is a word I would love to hear. I still hear too many people saying Boston's not a welcoming city. So I think welcoming is a word. And I think everything that's been said, and I'd say pathways to success. whatever that pathway is, whether it's job training programs and education. What I'm saying, not created then, but real pathways that if people want to figure out what they want to do, they can find that pathway to success, opportunities.
Let's say many more people in the senior leadership ranks of large companies and on private sector boards.
I thought you were going to say the first person of color who's mayor.
First person, and that's it.
Right? Unless you're still going to be around.
No.
I want to thank all our panelists tonight, Bob Rivers, Betty Francisco, Bennie Wiley, and of course, Mayor Walsh. Please give me a round of applause. And we have one more speaker tonight. Jim Rooney is going to close. Who's going to close? Oh, well, are you coming back?
I'm going to thank Shirley.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Shirley. And I'd like to let the GK 100 winners know that you'll be able to pick up your award on the way out tonight. And for our closing speaker, the president of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Jim Rooney.
Well, thank you, and thank you to my partner in this sponsorship, Paul Grogan and the Boston Foundation, despite the fact that you turned off the heat, the air whatever you did. It's, you know, I'd be happy to kick in a little more for this event if we could. Geez, I don't know what's going on. I also want to thank Colette, a force of nature. Thank you, Colette, for not just tonight, but all of the work you've done for the past 10 years. Lifelong Bostonian, and I guess my summary of tonight and the previous GK 100 is we needed this. And thank you for providing it to us, Colette. I have one duty. You heard about the winners of the GK 100, the second edition. I'm going to quickly call your attention to the 10 most game-changing equity ideas that are being recognized here tonight. Colette is very creative. It was mentioned earlier that the mayor and I think Bob, you're a white man who can jump too. Don't get any visuals in your head because there wasn't all that much jumping going on, I can tell you. So I'm pleased to make my second GK 100 or GK list. First is a white guy who can jump, and second in one of the 10 most game-changing equity ideas. And for that, the pace setters, I have Justin King and Sheena Collier to thank for doing all the work that goes into that. But the other most game-changing equity ideas, Amplify Latinx. Please give it up. BCNC POW Arts Center, the Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. Congratulations. Hack Diversity by my friends at the New England Venture Capital Association. Diversity Dialogues, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. Pipeline Angels, Boston. Yep, give it up. Change Maker Dinners, the United South End Settlements. Racial Equity Learning Community, Trinity Boston Foundation. Systems Workforce Development, Diversity IT Network, Cyber Warrior Academy. I'll say this wrong. Advocs Systems Workforce Development. Did I say it right? Advocate. That was with the real Boston accent that you got that. The Boston Trust Act, the Sanctuary City, Boston. And, of course, the pace setters. So thank you once again, Colette. Thank you to all of our guests here and panelists, and Shirley for doing a great job moderating this panel. I would like to amplify one answer. Shirley asked what white guys talk about. And I'll tell you a conversation shortly after Mayor Walsh got elected and I was appointed to the CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce. Brookings Institute came out with the ranking of Boston being the most unequal city in America. We had breakfast up at McKenna's in Dorchester. We looked across the table as two white guys and said, I don't want to be the mayor of the most unequal city in Boston. And I said, I don't want to be the president of the chamber of the most unequal city in Boston. So it was a great motivator and a great conversation amongst two white guys. Thank you all and have a great night.